Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're tackling a topic that's literally dominating break rooms, boardrooms, and dinner tables, and honestly, causing a lot of sheer anxiety. We are talking about the rapid, massive deployment of artificial intelligence in the workplace. I mean, over the last couple of years, we've watched generative AI go from this fascinating little novelty to a core operational tool. And with that shift comes a very real, very human fear. When the algorithm learns to do exactly what you do, what happens to your desk? It all really boils down to this one provocative question. Can AI take your job? Well, realistically, yeah, we are actively seeing it happen. But the much more important legal and social question is, can you actually be fired for it? Today, we're going to look at some groundbreaking recent developments that bridge the gap between these massive macro tech trends and, well, your personal, everyday job security. Okay, let's dive right into this. Here's the roadmap for the journey we're taking today. 1. The AI layoff wave. 2. The case of Zhu. 3. AI is a choice. 4. The HR and corporate shift. And finally, 5. What it means for you. Starting off with Section 1, the AI layoff wave, a global phenomenon. Before we get into any of the legal pushback, we have to understand the sheer scale of the restructuring going on right now. 80,000. According to recent reporting, nearly 80,000 U.S. technology workers have lost their jobs to AI-driven shifts just since the start of 2026. Tech giants are making incredibly aggressive moves here. Take Meta, for example. They recently announced plans to cut roles, and leadership explicitly attributed that move to needing to fund the massive, rising infrastructure costs tied to their AI investments. Think about that for a second. Human roles are being eliminated to literally pay for the servers and systems that power artificial intelligence. And over in China, the scale is equally staggering. The core AI industry there exceeded 1.2 trillion yuan in 2025 alone. You've got thousands of enterprises pushing the absolute boundaries of automation. In fact, by 2030, the penetration of next-generation intelligent agents is expected to top 90%. So this massive economic engine is exactly what has set the stage for these huge employment shifts and, as we're about to see, some really intense legal battles. That brings us to Section 2, the case of Zhao Shenzhou. The ripple begins in Hangzhou. Now, what's really interesting about this is how we can zoom in on one highly specific human story to anchor all this complex legal data. This story perfectly maps out the modern tech worker's worst nightmare. So a guy named Zhou was hired in November 2022 as a quality assurance supervisor. He was pulling in a solid 25,000 yuan a month. His whole job was matching user queries with large language models and filtering out problematic content. But as these AI models improved, they started to just absorb his actual tasks. The company then told Zhou they were reassigning him to a lower-level position with a 40% pay cut, knocking him down to 15,000 yuan a month. When Zhou understandably refused that massive cut, the company fired him. They offered a standard severance and cited organizational restructuring. But Zhou didn't just walk away. He took them to arbitration, and eventually, this case went all the way to the Hangzhou Intermediate People's Court. Moving to Section 3, AI is a choice, the legal framework. This entire legal battle essentially hinged on one specific definition, a major change in objective circumstances. Under China's labor contract law, an employer can actually terminate a contract if a totally unforeseeable disruption makes the job impossible to perform. Traditionally, we're talking about massive, completely uncontrollable events here. Think of a natural disaster wiping out a factory, or a company being legally forced to relocate across the country, or maybe a sudden drastic regulatory shift. And right here is where the big clash happens. Companies have been desperately trying to argue that the arrival of AI is exactly that, an uncontrollable external shock. They claim it's an efficiency upgrade so massive that it totally justifies immediate layoffs. But the courts, they completely disagreed. Going back to that natural disaster analogy, the court essentially said, look, adopting AI is a management decision. It's a voluntary business choice a company makes to stay competitive. It is absolutely not an unforeseeable shock like an earthquake. After all, a massive server farm doesn't just accidentally fall from the sky, right? Therefore, choosing to use AI does not automatically void a human being's employment contract. Because of this, the company's attempt to force a 40% pay cut was deemed entirely unreasonable, and Zhao's dismissal was officially ruled unlawful. And hey, this isn't just an isolated incident. There's this brilliant quote from a separate, prior case involving a Beijing arbitration panel. In that one, a map data collector named Leo was fired right after his company switched to AI-powered automated data collection.
The panel ruled that the company's adoption of AI was purely voluntary, and they explicitly stated the risks associated with that decision could not be transferred onto employees. So the judicial stance we are seeing here is incredibly consistent. Automating tasks doesn't just magically absolve employers of the contractual obligations they already made to their human workers.
Let's move to Section 4 and see how this builds. The HR and corporate shift, a governance issue.
You can imagine this ruling is sending shockwaves through chief information officers and HR departments worldwide. AI-led transformation is simply no longer just a neat IT project. It has moved way beyond a basic discussion about technology and efficiency and straight into the heavy realm of corporate governance and legal exposure. Industry analysts are pointing out that this creates a much sharper, far more logical framework for global markets to start seriously challenging AI-driven layoffs. Employers can't just vaguely wave their hands anymore and say, well, the algorithm did it. They actually have to demonstrate due process.
So this creates some pretty severe new evidentiary burdens on companies. They must now meticulously document all their workforce decisions. They have to actually prove they explored meaningful retraining and offered reasonable redeployment before just letting someone go. And perhaps the biggest trap for corporations right now, aligning their external messaging with their internal reasoning. Think about it. If a company jumps on an earnings call and boasts to their investors about these massive AI-driven productivity gains, but then turns around and tells HR they're firing staff because of a skill mismatch or routine restructuring, yeah, that narrative cap carries massive legal risks if a dispute comes up. Regulators and courts are absolutely going to be watching that.
Finally, Section 5, what it means for you, navigating the automated workplace.
So, the crucial point is, what does this actually mean for you, the everyday worker? We promise to translate these high-level legal shifts into some actionable takeaways. First, know your contract protections. Depending on where you live, labor laws might already require consultation or severance that companies might quietly try to bypass by using AI as an excuse. Second, push for internal upskilling. Make the company prove they're genuinely trying to retrain you for higher value roles rather than just defaulting to replacing you. Third, challenge unreasonable pay cuts. As we just saw in Zhao's case, a company trying to downgrade your role and slash your salary by 40% simply because an LLM can do a fraction of your job, that might not actually be legally defensible. And fourth, always remember, AI is a management choice. Restructuring is a voluntary corporate strategy. It is not an act of nature. Do not let companies shift the entirety of that transformation risk onto your shoulders.
Now, just to provide a balanced perspective on exactly where we're heading, consider what Goldman Sachs researchers noted in a recent report. They said, it's early days for AI adoption, and the impact on jobs will largely depend on how employers ultimately put the technology to best use. Look, technological progress is absolutely irreversible, that's a given, but it doesn't exist outside of our legal frameworks. We're in this very fragile transitional phase where the boundaries of workplace fairness are actively, in real time, being negotiated. So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought to chew on. Automation is definitely going to reshape work. It's going to change the tools we use and the everyday tasks we do, but will it override the fundamental principles of fairness in your employment contract? As we've seen today, the courts are starting to say absolutely not. Your labor has value, and a software update doesn't just automatically erase your rights. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I will see you next time.